Here we go. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Call Center Confidence with Cutter and Catt. What's going on? I'm Jason Cutter. I've got with me my good friend, Oliver Catt. How are you today, Oliver?
I'm good. Thank you, Jason. How are you?
I am good. I am super excited. This is a fun project that literally came about. So this is our first episode, people tuning in. So glad that you're here. We're going to have some fun talking about call center stuff, which is kind of a rare topic to be going on a live show, maybe a podcast. It's not hot, sexy topics that usually people would want to cover to get a lot of audience, but we're call center nerds, so we thought this would be super fun.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think one of the things that stands out, especially about what we're trying to do today, is that there is nothing really in the mainstream for the market for call centers, for salespeople, for leaders, for call center managers, all the way up through the C-suite, including your frontline teams. And I think that was that's really, really where it kicked off, wasn't it, Jason? It was a conversation. We were talking about that. We were talking about the call center space. We researched podcasts, we researched live feed, and you got a mill amount. So we thought, you know what, let's jump on that bandwagon and let's help anybody and everybody in that call center industry, no matter who you are, where you are, or where in the world you are. That's the most important thing, right?
Well, and that's the fun part. So I'm in the US, so I am in California, and you are in the Caribbean type area. You're somewhere in the Caribbean, right? And,
I'm in Grenada. Hey, you wouldn't tell it from my backdrop, but I'm in Grenada, south of the Caribbean, working across the US and the UK mainly. But the good thing about it is it's all Zoom, it's all online, or face to face really. Once COVID's disappeared, so we got some really good events coming up, especially when it comes to the call center confidence with Cutter and Catt. Now this is the first episode in many to come, where we're going to be talking about all different areas, all different topics. We're going to be talking about training. We're going to be talking about recruitment, workforce, leadership, sales, HR, you name it. And in the future, we're going to be bringing on some experts, especially in those fields that currently work in that industry, to discuss that in more detail, to answer your questions. And the first and foremost is this series is for you, for those of you that are here today watching us, or even listening when we turn it into a podcast or a radio show or Clubhouse or whatever it might be, because who knows where this is going to go. This is day one. I think the biggest thing to remember is we are here to help you grow, help you become that call center hero. And that's the slogan we went with, because no matter where you work, there's so many different departments in that call center industry. You can't really focus on one key area. Sales is a given, 100%, but we've got customer experience to throw in there as well. We've got workforce. Nobody talks about workforce. So we've got workforce professionals coming on here. Nobody really wants to talk about HR, but it's coming on. There's so many categories. What else are we going to throw in, Jason?
Well, I mean, there's the leadership, there's the training. I mean, there's just all these, the motivation, gamification, everything that goes into it that creates a successful, scalable call center operation. And the part that I love that's so fun is that we're both call center coach, trainer, professionals, you and I. So on the surface, we technically do the same thing. Some people might say that we're competition going after the same market. Nice thing is there's definitely more than enough call centers or inside telephone sales teams, right? Call center is one of those terms, as I talk to people about it, where they hear call center and they think 2,000 people in the Philippines, right? And yes, that's a call center, but a call center could be 20 people. It could be 10 people. It could be anything where there's telephone sales, there's a call center type environment, there's that vibe, and there's that growth for scale. And what's cool is that you and I do the same thing. We do it slightly different, complement each other, and come from different backgrounds. So I come from business to consumer, financial services, debt relief, mostly dealing with people's finances. And you come from a hospitality and travel background in the contact center space. And so it's fun because we both have these different perspectives and experiences from various parts of the world combined together and do what we can to help this community.
No, absolutely. And I think, we got to thank one person who's already made a comment on here already, who kind of initiated our conversation, which started this powerhouse. Yeah. Absolutely. Ryan Butler. Thanks for tuning in. He's here today. He's already made his comment, which I'm sure will pop up shortly. But Ryan, look, you're the one that initiated this. Little do you know. So it's thanks to you. But yes, as Jason was just saying, from a background perspective, telecoms, travel industry, hospitality, many kind of marketing areas, as you say, with call centers that have been attached to it. A company that I worked for many years ago would never say they owned a call center. They never ran a call center. They were a marketing and sales firm. They just so happen to have a call center attached to that, and that's who I worked for. So we're going to be talking everything. I mean, my background is specifically in a sales environment and a retail environment, all the way through to where I am now. And that was from about 20 years ago. I started in sales, and then in the call center specific industry, I've been there for just under 15 years now, working on those kind of industries and those specific should I say, campaigns and projects that Jason was mentioning a minute ago, up until recently when I was working for a hospitality and travel company in a sales and role for learning and development. So there's lots of things to talk about. There's lots of areas to cover. And like I said, we're going to be sharing our expertise. We're going to be talking about all things important. But most importantly, the question is, why are we doing this? And we kind of addressed it a minute ago. It's for you. It's for everybody out there, because there are thousands of people in a call center world. As Jason said a moment ago, in the Philippines, you've got South Africa, you've got India, the US, the UK, Spain, France, Italy, you name it. Globally, there are thousands of people. And we want to help people because we realize that lack of training in certain aspects is one of the words that's come out from some of the investigations and the kind of research that we've done. And we want to give those tips back, those hints, those points, any helpful tips that we can give you. That's what we're here for. So we want to see questions coming through. We want to see topics that you want us to discuss, because this isn't just us talking about our expertise and our experiences. We want you to tell us what you want to see next week. We want you to share with us what you want to see in future episodes. So that's why we're doing it. And there's a lot of benefits that are going to come with that, aren't there, Jason?
Yep. And like Oliver said, so if you're watching this live, leave a comment like our friend Ryan did. Just say hello, say where you're from. Just love to interact and make this less of a one-way Oliver and I talking to each other into the camera mode and more of an interactive event. And if you have questions, anytime, post them in there and we'll get to them. And our goal is to continue to improve this process, focus on this, get better at it, more interactive, add more things to it, and have some kind of focus where we know each week what we're going to talk about as kind of the guidelines, and then fill it in with your topic. So this week, for example, one of the things we want to start off with, which is, let's just say it's the big elephant in the room. And maybe it's not the elephant in the room because you can see the elephant. It's the invisible elephant in the room that nobody wants to even acknowledge that it's the issue, which is leadership. And it's leadership in organizations, in call centers specifically. And there's so many things for us to talk about. This might be the first of many weeks of talking about leadership and how it isn't going well, or what companies are doing wrong. Right, Oliver?
No, absolutely. And no, I agree with that. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's, what companies are doing wrong. I do agree with the sentiment. It's what they're missing out on. And I think that's one of the biggest kind of topics we need to address. Working with a number of clients, specifically since I started my own company, my own leadership and training and development company for the last 18 months. So I'm a little bit behind you in terms of tenure, Jason. That's where your expertise kick in. But one of the things that I really found is that people came to me because they've never invested in it. And individuals came to me because they've never been invested in. And I think that's one of the kind of, as you said, the elephants in the room that people don't like to discuss. I worked with a client recently who came to me because they went to their manager and said, I need help. I want support. And they were moving into that leadership role. So that's kind of really where, that came from, to that aspect. But like I said, leadership is something that everybody, I think, wants to talk about. It's the tip of their tongue. It's what we post about on LinkedIn most days. And we're going to be covering all areas of it, how we can help you, how we can give you tips and tricks to get through the day, performance management, time management, people management skills. There's so many different areas, and there's so many episodes that we can touch on this. I don't want to talk about it all in one go. But I think it's important to address all of those key areas, wouldn't you say?
Yes, for sure. And Michael McGuire, thanks for tuning in and saying hello from LinkedIn. Appreciate you being here and supporting it. I think the biggest thing with the leadership part is, and this is the common trend, I think this is the battle that, people like you and I are up against and hoping to shift, so it's not a battle, is the fact that companies, especially when they promote from within, what they generally do is say, hey, you're really good in sales. I'm going to promote you to be a manager, a lead, a supervisor, something higher up in the organization. And with the premise that you're good at selling, which means you should be good at getting other people to sell. And so I'm going to abdicate leadership to you and just assume that you know what you're doing, which those are two different skills. Anyone that's heard me, especially in the last 12 months, has heard me talk about this many times, and it just keeps popping up where the organization just assumes that that person knows. And those are two different muscles, right? It's two different skills. Leadership, and I think it's three. I think leadership is a skill, management is a skill, and then selling is a different skill. And organizations don't put enough into nurturing and developing that leader, that new leader, into somebody that can be successful.
No, absolutely. And that transition is one of the hardest transitions that you're ever going to have to make, because either it's one of those kind of key areas that you just mentioned, and it's let alone it's jumping into that role and kind of running the day to day. If I jump back to my previous experience, one of the first times that I was ever promoted into a managerial role was because I was in the right place at the right time. I was in the department. Did I know how to manage people? No. Did I fail? Absolutely. And I hold my hands up about that. And I talk about it very regularly, especially on LinkedIn, that it's not always the right place to be in. The company didn't necessarily give me any training. They gave me support. That was great. They supported me in that role. They were there, if we, come and see us if you need any help, come and see us if you got any questions. But I was in training. So because I was in training, I should know how to people manage. If I've trained other people in that area, but I'd not done any management training back then. And that was one of my first instances of where I realized that I actually need to take a step back and I need to learn some more. And I did. I took a step back. I moved to another company that was willing to nurture me, train me. I worked with some of the best managers in the industry who made me who I am today. And I wouldn't be here without that. And I think that's an important transition to make. And if you get it right, then that opens the door for so much progression. But if you get it wrong, it can scar you for life. If it's like getting back on that bicycle. If you don't want to get back on, you're never going to be a manager again, and you'll continue working, and you'll stay on that front line, either in sales or customer experience or, any of those other departments that need people on the phones. You're never going to progress. And I think that's one of the big important things here that we really need to discuss, especially in that call center industry, is that initial transition and how we actually do that.
And it's interesting that you just said, can scar somebody, is because that's so true. I mean, if you think about anything that you've ever learned, I've ever learned how to do, right, is once you do something enough, anything, right? Like I remember first time trying to play golf, you learn something, you build your own muscle memory. And if that isn't good, if it isn't the proper way or an effective approach, then unlearning that and redoing that is so painful to break it down and then to go back. And so when you talk about leadership, when somebody gets promoted and then they don't have the skills, they're not given everything that they should have, and they kind of figure it out on their own. If that's not the highest and best way to lead other people, then what happens is to unlearn that and redo it. The ego especially isn't going to like that, isn't going to want to change. And then you're kind of set, right? So it's almost one of those like raising children where, you know, how that goes in the beginning, that's what you're going to get like long-term, right?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I'm looking at the comments there from Al, you know, setting people up for failure is the current industry standard. Yeah, do you know what? I agree to an extent, Al. I really do. I think it's something, I don't think people do it on purpose. And
No,
and that's
not intentional.
Not 100%. And I think it's overlooked. If you really want to put that word on it, it is something that's just kind of, as you said at the beginning, you're in there, good, run with it, go and deal with it. Learn from the other managers around you. So how do you do that? And I think one thing that I did was I read a lot of books. I went to online training classes, Udemy, LinkedIn Learning, back in the day, Linda Learning before it was LinkedIn Learning. And that, you know, not everything is always about online training, and that's not real world environment. You know, you look when you for a job these days, you want real world experience before you move. Oh, I've done X amount of years at university. No, but we need on the job training. And that's the thing. It's about if you are put into that position, if you are promoted and you don't have the training, you don't have support, one piece of advice that I will give anybody is do not be afraid to ask for help. Whether it is your peers around you, whether it is your leadership team, whether it's your C-suite all the way up to your execs, or anybody online, friends, family, colleagues, co-workers. I think that's the most important thing you need to realize is hold your hand up and say, guys, I've been promoted. I am struggling in this area. And I think so many people don't do that because they're fearful or they're worried that if they do ask for help, it's a sign of failure. And that's not what it is at all. At all.
Yeah. And I will resonate and second that to the nth degree. I tell people this all the time, where when I've led sales teams and call centers and organizations, I appreciate more the people who come looking for help, because it means they want to grow and it means they want to learn. And to me, that makes them more valuable to the organization because they're trying to do more instead of just either getting by or doing the minimum or thinking they already know everything. I actually will give that person more attention. And the inverse is when people don't ask for help, I'm not going to go force help on them to try to get them to change what they're doing, because generally that doesn't work. So the people who are open to it, they'll get more of that attention. I mean, raising that hand is so important. And I think when you do that, then you take that in yourself. It's fascinating. You're talking about your story and how that happened for you. I wanted to share real quick, and then we can talk more about this leadership thing. For me, so I was in sales. So I fell into sales in the mortgage business. Then I shifted from that and was helping people in foreclosure as just an individual, right? With my business with a buddy of mine, Fred. And then from there, I went to go work for a company, and they hired me and brought me on as the VP of operations because I didn't want to do sales. Remember, anyone who knows me, I'm a dude with a marine biology degree. I didn't want to do sales. I didn't like sales. I never, even in the mortgage business, which was the height of real estate and then helping people in foreclosure, I still didn't think of myself as a salesperson. As salesperson was something completely different in my mind. And so I went to work as a VP of ops because I didn't want to do sales. They already had their VP of sales. I was like, cool, let me just do the operations. Then that guy didn't work out. They let him go. And then immediately I become the VP of sales and operations. And oh, by the way, now I'm in charge of telemarketers and salespeople. Oh, and I need to build a script, and I need to do trainings, and I need to create everything because it's all failing and falling apart. And at that point, I had never been trained in sales, and I've never been trained in leadership and never been trained in training, and then figured it out somewhat from there. And, it's that common path, right? It's like, okay, you seem like you can do it, so go and hope that it works out, right?
Well, at least they threw you in at the deep end.
Super deep end. super deep end. And then what happened from there is, because I had that experience, every company I went to work at figured I just knew I knew what I was doing, and they hired me to then build and fix the sales teams. What I realized is I've never received management training, and I've never received sales training in all of my career. No organization has ever said,
I'll send you my
let's
sign
go
up
through
form
some
so I
sales
can
training.
train you.
What's that?
I said I'll send you my sign up form so we can do some training together.
I'd be good. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I don't even know what I'm doing. But it's fascinating because it's like you, right? It's all self-taught. Had to figure it out, especially on the leadership side. And that's one of the big things. I know I do what I do, and I know you do, is to help others not have to learn the hard way, right? Not have to fail, go through that process, help them succeed, and then scale, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of companies implement a really good learning management system. You know, there's a number out there. I'm not going to talk about specific brands, but there are some really good platforms out there that companies can use that are really priced at a great price point per head. And if you have the right content on there, you can really make a difference. And I think, you know, when you make that difference, you put leadership content in there, you put sales content in there, you put videos in there. But one thing I'm going to be brutally honest about is don't fill it with nonsense just for the sake of saying, I've got all of this content on a platform, because it doesn't work. You know, you've got to make sure it's targeted. You've got to make sure it's going for the right people. So sales, leadership, CX, whatever it is, make sure you're targeting the right content for the right people. Don't just dump, I'm not going to swear on here, but don't just dump bad stuff on a platform. It's like throwing mud on a wall and seeing what sticks, because none of it's going to go up there. And don't overload your platform. Don't use it as a knowledge base. Use it to train people. And like I said, it's not a replacement for real life scenario, for coaching, for one-on-one, for face-to-face, whatever it might be. That doesn't replace any of that. It's there to kind of go as a blended platform, especially to help you through that transition. There's so much content out there. I can't recommend enough, but if you do your right research, you can absolutely find all the right stuff out there. And just touching on a point out there a minute ago, you know, when you talked about going into your baptism by fire with all of your training, all of your scripting and everything else, you know, it's also important to realize that it's about the people you surround yourself with. If you've got the right team around you and you've got the right kind of subordinates, peer group, and superiors, then you can be whoever you need to be at the right place at the right time. And if you have that right team in place who support you, then the world is your oyster. You can be the best leader out there. And that they're the people that are going to help you through that transition.
Yeah. And I think that's great. And I've been fortunate to work with some good business owners who were good leaders and empowering leaders and kind of instructional teaching leaders, which was helpful, and holding me accountable. So that's good. But yeah, you want to make sure you have that team, you know, and that's what can be tough if you work at an organization and you realize the people around you aren't heading in those same directions or aren't supportive, or maybe a lot of politics and bureaucracy and drama instead of, you know, how do we just win as a team? Some of that you can handle, some of that, you know, might be best to move on from. And I think that's the key. And some people putting some comments, AJ, appreciate that. One of the things that he said in there is that companies that do provide management training, a lot of times it's training subordinates. So how to manage subordinates, how to lead subordinates, but there's also managing up and horizontal. And how do you manage your manager, right? Which is something I've been good at in the past, which is about setting those expectations and being able to, you know what you're tasked to do, and then being able to make sure it happens. And I think that's super important, is to not just see, okay, like I'm the boss and then, you know, I'm pushing down everyone else, but just as a leadership skill up and around.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that was one of my biggest failures when I first stepped into management. And that was not being able to manage up or understanding managing up. You know, I can manage a team. I didn't want to be everybody's friend, which is another topic we're going to come to later on or another day, because that's a whole other situation. But managing up for me, I found really difficult because I didn't know about it. I didn't expect it. I just, you know, I went in with my reports. I did this. I never kept my manager informed as and when. It was always kind of, here's my weekly report. I'm just going to get on with it. And when they came to me, it was like, well, where's this? Where's that? And I was like, because we haven't had those conversations. You know, staying on top of certain things to kind of make sure that you meet their expectations, because they're the ones paying your bills, right? They're
Yep.
they're the ones that are making you there. They're the ones that are keeping you in the job. And if you're not kind of supporting them, then that's never ever going to work. So yeah, AJ, I think that's a very, very great topic to touch on. Managing horizontally, as you say a minute ago as well, Jason, is your peer group. They're your support group, and that's one thing you need to realize as well, is that when you are promoted, it isn't just about above, it isn't about below. It's about who your new support network becomes. And kind of on what I said a minute ago about who you surround yourself with, because when you're on the front line, when you're on the phones and you are a CX, sales, whatever kind of department you're in on that front line, and you move in, you can't be everybody's buddy anymore. You have to be their kind of boss, so to speak, as we were saying, although we'd like to call it a leader. But that support network around you is your new peer group. It's about how do you make that transition? How do you go from making, your old friends to kind of say, hey, look, now I'm taking a step back and creating a contract with them, like a psychological contract with them to say, hey, this is where I draw the line now. Not to say these are my new friends, because all of a sudden you sound a little bit pretentious. It could be seen to be on a power trip. We don't want any of that. So it's making sure that we do the right stuff at the right time. So there's lots of things to talk about, especially in that kind of environment, and how we kind of cover off that kind of transitional period. There's a lot of pitfalls that we need to avoid. There's a lot of wins that you can do that are very quickly. But pitfalls we definitely need to stay away from, don't we, Jason?
Yeah, for sure. And let's talk about that one, since you talked about it. And again, I appreciate everyone's comments and questions. Keep putting them in there. We'll keep addressing them. Flow them in here. There's some of them that people have posted that haven't gotten to yet. We might use those as topics in other conversations. So we're ignoring you. Definitely seeing all those coming through. So I appreciate that. Let's talk about this one here. So let's imagine the scenario where you get promoted. Yesterday, they were all your peers. They were all your chums. You were, and maybe this is the better one to start with. But yesterday you were in the pit with everybody on the phones in the call center. And then now you've been promoted and all of a sudden you have to be a boss, right? And as you phrased it to me before, go from buddy to boss. And where that challenge, how you handle that. I've seen some interesting things. I'm curious to hear your thoughts and suggestions, experiences.
Yeah, I mean, to touch on a couple of the comments, especially from AJ, as they came through. It's the industry standard to set people up to fail, as you said. It's about giving people the right training, and in that scenario, if you don't do it, which I didn't receive it, I did fail. Well, I see it as a failure. I think the company I worked for at the time didn't really see it as a failure. But I think as that person, the most important thing to do is to absorb and soak up as much information as possible. Learn from the people around you, to learn from your superiors, sit in with them, and make sure that in that scenario and in that environment, you are asking them for help when you need it, as I said a few moments ago. And I think that's really important, so you don't go home at the end of the day stressed and freaking out with your to-do list about what you've got to do for the rest of the week, the day, because all of a sudden your non-existent to-do list from working on the phones, coming in at 9, leaving at 6, or coming in at midday and leaving at 9 o'clock, those in and outs have gone. It's not about leaving at 6 o'clock anymore. As soon as that 6 o'clock button comes, you can take your phone and you can walk the dog. Those days are gone. You are now the company. You represent the company. And more than likely, in any supervisor, team leader, positional contract and up, instead of working hours saying 40, it now says working hours 40 plus business requirements or business needs. They throw that clause in there. That's a horrible little clause, but we all have to go through it because it's there. All right.
Yep.
I've been in those scenarios where, I've worked my Monday to Friday, 9 till 6, left the office at 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, been on a plane at the weekend to go to another location to then work in another office. And it happens. But that's the thing. But do you know what? Everybody wants to be a manager. They want to get that kind of step up in their life. But there are people that don't want that. And there are people that do want to stay. They're happy doing what they want to do. But the thing is, if you do want that promotion, you need to understand what that entails. You need to understand that it's longer hours, it's more stress, it's more, as they say, Spider-Man says, more power comes more responsibility. I can't remember the quote exactly, but
Yep.
it's that exact same mentality that you have to have as a leader. And when you make that transition, you've got to be setting expectations for the person that you're promoting or that you're moving. I had a scenario recently through a friend of mine that there's a company that if you want to be promoted or you want to take the next step in your career, you actually apply for that role, knowing what you're getting yourself into. You completely appreciate that. You apply for that role, and 3, 4, 5 months later, they let you know whether you've got the role. There's no interview. There's no conversation. There's no discussing it.
Wow.
It's literally, you put your application through. Don't get me wrong, you still have to provide paperwork and information and kind of like a coursework type thing. But essentially, 3, 4, 5 months later, they just turn around and go, Jason, yeah, we got your application. You've been promoted. Here's some more money. Good job.
Where do you go? No training, right?
And no training. Now, obviously, supervisory is still very entry level, but it is, higher salary, promotion, new title, which you would expect would come with that information. But it's definitely something that, you need to have good leadership around you to support the new leaders that are coming into the business. And that's kind of my key point on that. There's a lot more that we can talk about when it goes into buddy to boss, about how you do it, the transition, the conversations you need to be having, but we'll save those for another day, because I think that it's a much longer conversation. And today's just an introduction to what the skills we're going to be showing everybody, right?
Oh, no intro. We got to jump right into it. And I think what's interesting about that story that you told, which is not just a story, it's happening right now. In fact, people are waiting for those decisions to see if they're going to get bumped up without interview or process, is that, when I hear something like that, it's when a company is essentially saying, like, we're going to promote you and we don't need to interview you. Don't we need to talk to you? We're just going to look at your stats as a salesperson. We're also not going to give you training or guidance once you get up there, because we just assume that you're going to know what you're doing. And again, abdicate the supervisory role to you and just assume that you know how to supervise as well as you know how to sell, right? Which is ineffective. Because again, most and the reason why is that most people, I'll say it, as humans, we are all designed with a brain that's focused on our own survival. All that matters is our own survival and getting what we want in life, right? And living long enough to procreate and expand our genes and to thrive and move on in life, right? And so what happens is that part of our brain thinks that because we view things a certain way, that everyone views things a certain way, and everyone sees the world in the same exact way we do. And what happens is, if you're not careful and if you have that perspective, you get moved into some kind of leadership role. You just assume that everyone's motivated by the same things, afraid of the same things, excited about the same things, will work as hard in the same ways that you did when you were in that position. And the problem is that everybody is actually different. Everyone thinks they're special and everyone else is the same as them, but then everybody thinks that too, which means everybody wants to be treated in a different way.
No, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more on that one. And just to touch on a couple of comments that have just come in there, looking at, Rich, can't remember the last time I worked normal hours, but I wouldn't change it for a minute. Empowerment and making a difference is the motivation. Absolutely. 40 hours a week, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, those days are gone. I think though I have these things, a lot of people that now have mentality that now they're working from home, they do have a bit more of a work-life balance. They're still working the same hours, but they can throw the laundry. Hey, I got a wash on right now. It's going, but you have that normality in that sense, and I think that's one of the big things to really kind of make a difference, and you have to expect all of that. So there are a lot more leadership pitfalls that come that way. I think, You know, as you touched on, we talked about managing up. I think that's a big area. It's making that right transition. I also will always live and die by one quote. And this was a quote that was given to me by a manager going back, 2010, probably earlier, but that's 2010 is the year that I remembered it. A call center that I worked for about 3 or 4 years. And that was that when I took my step up, it was, you know, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And that's a really big metric. And that is stuck with me, that quote, through thick and thin. And that goes for every single department, every single leader, no matter who you are. And I remember then going to my next manager as I left that company and saying, well, you know, I work in training. You know, training doesn't really generate revenue. He asked me that question. He said, what revenue do you bring into the business? And I sat there very early doors, very, you know, in my early call center career going, training doesn't bring in revenue. What are you on about? I train people. And then I sat there and he explained it to me in more detail. And all of a sudden, my brain started to tick and I started to realize about how we really do make a difference, how training creates the foundation for revenue, how it creates the motivation for increased revenue. You know, you work with companies, and I've been fortunate enough to work with some where, you know, we've doubled their sales, doubled their revenue just through a little bit of side-by-side coaching and training. And that wasn't to the frontline agents. That was to the supervisors and the managers. Because I think the most important thing is to realize here, and this is a pitfall that comes with through leadership and through training, is that when people like us, consultants or people that go in to do training and coaching go in, I think it's important to realize that when we do go in, we don't want to go in to do a tick box exercise. We don't want to go in there and somebody say, hey, come and do, you know, 100 days worth of training for us. We want sales, we want customer service, we want leadership training, the whole 9 yards. And then I step away. And then all of a sudden, everything goes back to normal. We don't want that. And that's, I think, the big thing to realize when it comes to a pitfall. So for me, my kind of transition into this piece is when you are training your leaders, when you are training that, the biggest pitfall you can avoid is make sure that you embed and you create long-term sustainability for your leaders so that they're able to continue the training methodology, the coaching, the leadership skills, whatever content it is. Make sure they can do it when your trainer steps away. Create that longevity. And I think that's something really important for people to remember.
It's so interesting thinking about training being not a revenue generator, not a part of the revenue ops. And that so many organizations I've seen, all like you said, treat it like it's a cost center, like it's a cost. Like, oh yeah, I mean, we could bring in a trainer, but that's kind of expensive, and you know, everyone's doing okay. The team's closing enough deals, they're working hard enough, they're effective enough, and you know, it really, when you get down to it, is that balance between, do I invest in people, which is what that is, and do I help them succeed, or do I constantly play in the hamster wheel of turnover and failure and having to have meetings about meetings and pushing everyone and or yelling at people, or you know, bribing them with spiffs and rewards and prizes, right? Like the carrot and the stick mode, or do I just invest in them training? And then, like you said, it's the and Nursan, thank you for that comment. Training is your enabler to your revenue generating streams in your business. It's so true. But then it's also, like you said, too, it's not just checking the box. Okay, I brought a trainer in, I brought in a speaker, we did a workshop on a Saturday, and that was cool. We checked the box and we're good until next quarter when we'll do it again, or the next time we're not hitting our numbers. But the problem is that's kind of like a good movie where, hey, that was a cool movie. By tomorrow, you've moved on, right? It doesn't matter. And what you want, instead of giving people fish, is you want to teach them to fish. And like 100%. You said, like, how do you coach the coaches, train the trainers, help the managers manage, and give them the tools in the toolbox? What I've seen why a lot of organizations don't do that is because they've had turnover and they don't trust their people to stay. They're afraid to invest in them because they're thinking, I'm going to invest in them and teach them these new skills, and then they're just going to leave me like the other ones have, and then I've wasted my money on them, right?
Yeah.
And it's this whole chicken and the egg debate.
No, do you know what? Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there is they don't trust their teams. That's one of the biggest points because they don't trust whether they're going to go or whether they're going to leave. And they think, oh, I've just spent, 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 on bringing a trainer in. And now these people are going to leave. But I think it's, again, I can't remember quotes today, but it was, I think it was Richard Branson who said, something along the lines. I should always have like quotes on this other screen right here so that I can reference them during this
next
session.
week.
We'll 100%. But it was like, along the lines of, we train people to keep them. Eventually for them to move on and learn. Whereas, if you don't treat them, you're going to end up keeping a bad employee. You give them new skills so that they can move on. And I think that's one of the big things is you expect people to leave. People aren't going to stay in companies forever. That's not to be expected. And I think when it goes back to bringing these trainers in, I think it's also important to note that trainers that you bring into your business or that you hire to be your resident trainers or external trainers that you bring in, as you say, whether it's TikToks or whether it's something that you're actually going to be doing, is these trainers need to know your business. If they don't understand what you do, if they don't understand the departments that they are going into, I feel like I'm giving tips away to companies to hire other experts other than us two here. So this is what you need to ask somebody to hire them, right? Although we're not doing that for this reason, but you need to make sure that these people know what they're talking about. And, if they came in, for example, and they're working with sales teams, what are the sales channels? Is it phone? Is it inbound? Is it outbound? Is it e-chat? Can they deal with all of those different streams and all of those different channels? And I think it's really important to understand that, these people know what your business is about. They know your product. Now, they don't need to know your product inside out. That's something you're never going to know as well as the people that work for your business. But they need to have an understanding of your product, but more importantly, how your channels, how your streams, how your revenue is generated, and can they talk about that and give examples? I recently witnessed a sales trainer. I was asked to kind of view some training and watch them go in and very off the shelf, out of the book, generic training. No role plays, no back and forth, no testing the waters to see if they can actually talk about their products. And that's a different type of training. And that stems away from the tick box and the checkbox that you were talking about just a few moments ago.
Yeah, what you're describing sounds more like lecturing, like in public school, where it's like, hey, I'm the smart one and you're the student, and I'm just going to teach you these things and hopefully you absorb it and use it. Yeah, I found that quote. I put it up on the screen. Not sure if you saw it, but Richard Branson's quote: train people well enough so they can leave, treat them well enough so that they don't want to.
Thank you. I'm glad you told me that. I remember, I think one of my, if I remember correctly, the last company I worked for, and that's kind of why it came to mind. It's actually on his wall. It was a black and white photo, I think. And it was on his wall. I think he signed up here. So if he's here, he knows who he is. But it's on your wall, if I remember. So message me if it's there. Still.
And that's a great quote. I've never heard that quote. I've lived by something like that with that philosophy. And the thing is you've also got to understand that if somebody is going to move on, they're going to move on, but you can't let that stop you from giving that person and your whole team everything possible. Because what happens, like you said, is that if you don't give them everything and they don't get better, then you're stuck with a really crappy employee.
Yeah.
Right? Which would you rather have? A good employee who has a good impact that moves on potentially, or a crappy employee that just never leaves until you fire them?
Yeah, 100%. Or unlike some companies, if they do have that problem, they just move the problem somewhere else.
Yes.
Which other department
department
can I stick them in? Where else can I move them? And that's another pitfall as a leader, right? If you have somebody, and I'm not saying that, if you have a bad employee, but if you have somebody that is working for you that isn't doing what you want them to do, or you struggle to communicate with, or you just don't bond with, right? First of all, there is probably always something somewhere within the organization to place these people. I think, as far as I'm concerned, I think everybody's always got skill. You might not just bond with them. Okay. Yeah. So, look for those skills. If you feel that you want to get rid of somebody as a leader, look deeper than that and say, right, do you know what? Can I move them? Do they have skills elsewhere? Have a conversation with them and see if you can migrate them somewhere else. If there is nowhere for them to go, don't just palm them off on another supervisor or another leader. Don't just say, oh, they're great. See you later. Because that doesn't work, because you are just moving the problem. Deal with it head on. Don't be afraid to have those crucial conversations. Crucial conversations are very difficult to have, but we all need to have them. And that, again, is another topic for another day when we talk about how we overcome the situations for conflict or difficult conversations about how we have those people, because nobody likes to do it. Everybody gets nervous. I've seen people start shaking. I've shook. All right, I've got nervous when I've had to sit down with somebody, because it's not the nice thing to do.
No. And you don't know where it's going to go, right? Could lead to something unpleasant, could lead to drama. When we get to that difficult conversations, I've got some stories about, terminating people, and the ones that I thought were going to go really bad. And then the ones that I thought were going to be fine that then ended up going really bad. So, it's always interesting. But one thing before we wrap up today, because now we have a ton of topics we're going to cover. Appreciate everybody coming in and the comments and people, leaving the questions in there. Love it. It's super fun. But one that I wanted to address before we leave, because it kind of plays into this and it might segue to other topics later on, is Ryan, our buddy Ryan Butler, put a question in there and said, how important do you think having a high emotional IQ, high EQ plays in being in leadership and obviously being a good leader or an effective leader? What do you think?
Do you know what? I think it's very important. But there are skills you can learn. There are characteristics of who you are that you're built with and that you bring through from birth. Having a high EQ definitely makes an impact. It definitely allows you to look at situations very, very differently. But everybody is different, and everybody has different leadership styles and different levels of EQ as well. And I think that kind of changes as you go through the scale. As you learn, I think that number also changes. What do you think?
I think so. I mean, I think it depends on how you define emotional intelligence, emotional IQ. Is that, being empathetic? Is that picking up cues from other people? Is it thinking about, which goes under empathy, thinking about other people and what they want and need, and then making it about them in that situation, or being able to pick up things from them and then move forward, right? Versus somebody who just misses those cues or is so self-centered, they just don't care. And if that's the case, like for me, those things I just mentioned that you could put under a high EQ, emotional intelligence, is also, to me, what makes for a very effective salesperson and sales professional, because they're making it about the other person. They're trying to help that other person succeed, which is the potential client. Then in a leadership role, they're doing the same thing and making it about the people that are around them and helping them succeed, knowing that if they're winning, then that leader's going to win and the company's going to win. So for me, I think that's important everywhere. And I think that's truly, I think you can learn it. I think you can develop it once you understand the parts of it, understand what goes into emotional intelligence, and think, okay, that's what that means. This is what I can work on. That's why it's important. And then I think you can work on it, especially to make it applicable into a leadership role. And then B, I think it's something that you have and you can apply to everywhere. And that's so important. And obviously, is going to make the difference in everything that you do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also looking at Nurson's comment just a few moments ago, high EQ is essential, but you need to have control over your EQ. And then the second message saying it should not control you. Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. And the thing is, I've worked with people that have had high. I've worked with people that had low. When you said a few comments a minute ago about the people that don't have control or anything kind of over that, I've worked with a few of them who shall remain nameless. But we've all been there. And that's the thing. It's not just me. Every single person who's watching right now, every single person who's going to listen to this or watch this post today, they're all going to be thinking of the person who we're all thinking of in their own industries, because we've all got them. And that's one thing that stands out. And working with people and working kind of with a conflicting situation is another topic for a rainy day.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's so much we're going to cover. Appreciate everyone in their comments. I put up on the screen all of your information as we wrap up here, so people can find the Catt, the Catalyst. I won't say I'm jealous, because that's not a good emotion, but I love the fact that you have the Catalyst with your last name being Catt. I just got to say, I just think that's awesome. So lots of people can find you, Oliver, at thecatalyst.com, thecatalyst.com website. You have your link tree, LinkedIn, obviously that's where we met and where we're at. And then me, pretty simple, Jason at Cutter Consulting Group, or my main hub is jasoncutter.com, which is the link tree equivalent on my site.
So just something I do need to reference when you just talk about my branding just a moment ago. That's all credit due to my wife. I will say I literally sat down when I decided to set up my own company. I had no idea. I went through Oliver Consulting. I went through Catt Consulting. It was OCC. There was so many different things, and I think she dropped it. She was like, "What about the Catalyst?" And I was like, "No, I don't like it."
Yeah.
It just sat over in that corner for like about 3 weeks. And then eventually, when I was building my website and everything else, and I just wanted to kind of make it sit there, it kind of went, let me pull that back. And she's like, "Oh, did I just tell you so? I think I did." I was like, okay. So if she's on here, full credit to you, because that's all you.
That is awesome. I love it. Any final thoughts before we end this first kind of mashup intro call center confidence episode?
Just for me, if you want to learn, if you want to grow, if you want to, I was going to roll with a pun there and say, if you want to be a call center hero, then look, watch more of these. Come and join us every week. Listen to the podcast when we get that up and running, because this is going to transition into that. And who knows where this is going to go? Are we going to branch out to more platforms? Are we going to give more topics? And like I said, this is for you. So if you're watching, if you're listening, if you're watching this post recording, make a note of what you witnessed today, take it down, come to the next session and write your comments, write your questions, and we will do our best to answer them. We are going to have the best in the business going to be joining here. There are people in this comments column right now that I'm seeing that we're going to have to invite some of you up here, because you guys have got the skills, you've got the knowledge, and you guys are going to be coming in here. Some of you I've worked with for many years who I know are still in the call center industry and doing very well for themselves. So these people will be coming on, and we want to be hearing from you. And like I say, don't be afraid to message us separately, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is. We will answer your questions, and we are here to help. That is what this is. We are here to help you. What about you?
I appreciate that. And yeah, like Oliver said, the goal of this is to help everybody and share this knowledge, share information. It's not a sales pitch for either of us. There's no big call to action. If you're wondering, okay, where's their big call to action and sales pitch? There isn't one. Obviously, we want to share, and if we can help anybody, we would love to. But in between episodes, when you catch this, find us both. LinkedIn's the easiest, I know, for both of us. We'd love to hear it, and ideas and topics. We have the benefit of seeing lots of organizations from the outside third-party perspective. And I always love hearing from people who are currently in organizations and what they're seeing face-to-face in their mode every day. And so topics you want to talk about, challenges you have, successes. And then, like you said, at some point what we'll do is we'll expand this. We'll have more people in here using this platform that I'm using for this. We can have a whole bunch of people in here and just make it a fun party talking about call centers. So we'll see where this show takes us.
No, 100%.
Everyone, make sure to tune in. So we're going to do this Wednesdays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. UK time for all of Oliver's UK buddies and tribe in that area of the world.
And just to add very quickly, obviously, because it's still centric to the US and this side of the world where we're both based, center is spelt with an ER, just obviously for the Brits letting you know. We do know that it is normally spent RE. That was on the poster originally before Jason actually said, well, can I have one with the US spelling, please? So we just went with the center rather than center.
And since it's my StreamYard and it's my LinkedIn Live, I went with the center banner. No matter what, I am an only child, and I do like things my way sometimes. But yes, center. And again, we bought some URLs. There's some websites to come. It'll be super fun. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks Paul, Rich, Fred, Stacy. Good to see you. Yasin from Morocco, Nursin. Thanks everyone for joining. Al, Oliver. Thanks for kicking this off with me, inspiring this to happen, and then having a lot of fun. I appreciate it, and I'm excited to doing this, many, many times.
Yeah, keep it in the calendar, guys, and we'll see you next week.
All right, that's it. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.